Will I die for my country or my own beliefs? But how can I decipher the two if my own morality is based off one's country's belief? Do I separate myself from the nation, or do I stay patriotic due to the occasion? Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor, theologian, and a key founding member to the Confessing Church. Apart from his theological writings, he was known for his resistance to the Nazi dictatorship of Adolf Hitler. His actions were concerning the justifiable protection of acts of civil disobedience. Bonhoeffer was unique and different in many ways, and in so his conscientious moral conviction was so deeply rooted. Brownlee states that you have to be cognitive and reflective in obtaining such a strong conviction. This is something Bonhoeffer did very often. One of Bonhoeffer's goals was to assassinate Hitler. In his own mind, it established the justifiability of legal exemption from criminal conviction for acts of civil disobedience. In doing so, the murder of Hitler would have been justifiable due to this claim. It is the characteristic excellence of the strong man that he can bring momentous issues to the fore and make a decision about them. The weak are always forced to decide between alternatives they have not chosen themselves. This quote is very powerful in that Bonhoeffer challenged one to think on his own and choose for themselves, rather than choose what's given in front of them. In Germany, the Nazi Party presented themselves in a way where people were deciding in alternatives that the Nazi Party was providing rather than themselves. Brownlee's conditions that set formal thin requirements of rationality and conditions that required that the conscientious convictions be public rather than private. Despite these requirements, conscientious convictions need not necessarily be correct or sound. One of my favorite quotes of Bonhoeffer is, "Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just entitled to as we are." Bonhoeffer's Christian presuppositions have a direct influence on his teachings and self-awareness. It is necessary to point out that Bonhoeffer does not begin with a politically motivated frame of mind, but from the perspective of a devout pastor concerned with the suffering of others at the hands of his countrymen. The central motivating force behind his real-life actions, or at least as he is able to articulate such a force, is worth including in a serious exploration of his life. Not to include Bonhoeffer's Christology as the centerpiece of his ethical and political thinking would be to betray the integrity of his actions and ignore his own words. It was his own thoughts and beliefs that separated himself from the church in Germany and made him form and join the resistance group. The gap thesis identifies the fact that even in a reasonably just society, there is a gap between the formal confidabilities of normatively legitimate offices and positions and the broadly non-confidable moral responsibilities. The moral role thesis states that in cases of non-trivial divergences between the two, it is morally obligatory for an agent to depart from formal expectations and follow his or her own moral responsibilities. He wrote a letter to all the pastors in Germany and asked for their support and guidance in these hard times. Not only did he show his conscientious moral convictions through his communicative and non-evasive ways, but showed his senses of moral responsibility he owed himself and the community. Both conscious and conscientious moral convictions give rise to moral rights. Conscience gives rise to a moral right that protects our ability to honor special moral responsibilities. Conscientious moral convictions gives rise to two moral rights, including a moral right to inner control and free thought, and a moral right to conscientious action, including free expression and civil disobedience. Silence in the face of evil, is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Faced with fear, I have a duty of my own, but to separate from my peers, my cover will be blown. Should I act in the name of God, or should I be blindly obedient and put my guilt to sob?